Hi, I'm Tim, welcome back to the corner, and if this is your first visit then welcome. Back in the day, the very first printer I ever owned was a Commodore MPS801, and it went with my Commodore 64, which was fine, but the print quality was quite frankly bloody awful. And so I got rid of it and replaced it with one of these. This is an Epson FX80, and let's take a look. The FX80 back in the day was considered to be the workhorse of dot matrix printers. It's a 9-pin printer, which means basically that each character is formed of 9 vertical dots, and it runs on fanfold paper, and this is a particularly yellow version of it. It came from Watford Electronics, as you can see from the label that's stuck on there. The peel-off labels are actually still on, which is interesting. So, looking around the machine, it's got an on-off switch on the side. On the back, I would imagine this lived on a windowsill or something, because on the back you can see that there is a undiscoloured area where the paper would have gone, and everywhere else is very, very yellow. So I think the sun came in this way. Look at that, that's definitely a tan line. And this is a Centronics printer, so it's basically a 36 pin, is it 36 or 34? I think it's 36. IEEE style, well, they call it a Centronics connector because it's mostly used for Centronics. And then above it, this little hatch is available for plug-in interfaces such as a Commodore 64 interface or a PET interface or an RS-232 serial interface, which you could also get. It's quite heavy, unlike the MPS801, which was a pretty lightweight affair. Partly that's the rugged construction. This is quite thick plastic, and of course there's a lot of metal inside. Now I suspect, looking at the dust on the surface here, that it's going to be very dirty inside, but let's start taking it apart and have a look. Now I think this definitely is a case for something that needs retrobrighting, so we will do that later. This is the ribbon. Let's take that off. Hello. So that's I'm not quite sure what they call those, but you get them on typewriters. The ribbon, I think, just pulls out. There we go. That might still be usable, but I suspect from the amount of dirt it's probably dried up. Anyway, you can still buy ribbons. They're only about $5 each. They're not really expensive. This rod definitely needs cleaning. Before we try and power it up, I'm definitely going to need to clean this out very, very thoroughly. So this takes sprocket feed paper. And you can see here the sprockets. I'd like to thank PCBWay for sponsoring this video. PCBWay make PCBs like these and these, and we've been featuring them on the channel for quite some time now. We've built several projects like this one and this one and this one. But they make more than just PCBs. They do CNC machining, they do 3D printing, they do sheet metal fabrication. This is the most recent PCB that I've got from them. It is a prototype board, and we're going to be using this on the Commodore 64 in a future video. If you need PCBs like this, for example, or you have any other kind of requirement for PCBs, 3D printing, etc., check them out. www.pcbway.com. And this is a flap that actually gets you into the dip switches and other internal bits and bobs. So let's have a look inside here. Should just unclip. Yep, there we go. So this is dip switches and some sort of Epson branded chip that I can't read because it's covered in grot. I think also in there goes the plug-in interface. Now we should be able to take the top panel off. I think there's just going to be 4 screws. and it should lift out. That is covered in dust. What's interesting about these printers is that you can still get the manual for it online from Epson, and you can still get drivers for various Windows machines going back to Windows 7, I think, and all the way up to Windows 10. Probably the Windows 10 driver will work with Windows 11. I don't know. I don't have a Centronics parallel board to try any Windows drivers, so that would be an interesting thing to try at some point. As far as I can tell, there are no Mac drivers, but then I'm not sure I remember seeing a Mac with a parallel port. And we need to pull the knob off. The dirt on that. Okay, that clips under there, and this goes onto this board here. And remember which way round that is. Black is on the outside, red is on the inside for when we want to come and plug it back in. Okay, so this is the print electronic, or the print mechanics. Basically the print head, the paper motor. No, sorry, that's the print head motor. There's another motor somewhere there that rotates the paper. Power supply, lots of transistors, I would guess. It's going to be ROM. I guess that's a CPU maybe of some sort. That's going to be the voltage regulator because it says on it in big writing voltage reg. And this is going to be the interface for a plug-in protocol adapter. So an IEEE 488 card or an RS-232 card or a Commodore 64 card, serial bus card, would plug into this and screw onto these terminals. Looks like there's a socket for another card in there. That might be for a second card that goes on this side. Maybe there's different versions of the printer, possibly had different configurations of ports on the back. So I think the first thing to do is going to be to give this a good clean. So let's get to it. I've turned the printer around so that I can see it easier from this side. Looking at these screws and these nuts, they are Loctited, and some of these as well, so that the board is fixed to the metal chassis with Loctited screws. So we don't want to take those out if we can avoid it. That just lifts off. Fortunately, that's just a simple mains connector. It's not got a filter in it, which means there are no reefer capacitors to go bang, so that's a good sign. So I think maybe this whole thing comes off as a single unit, in which case we don't need to unplug stuff. So I would guess that this is going to be a fixing screw. Fortunately, these are not Loctited. So you can't get this out without taking the board out. How badly do I want to retrobright that? I guess not badly enough. It can stay there as a reminder of what the original colour was. Most of this is going to be paper dust. That has been there for a long time. Okay, that's a lot cleaner. Now I've also gone and cleaned these bits of plastic as well. It was all basically paper dust on them. This is not perfect, but it's a lot cleaner than it was. This is called a paper bale, I have discovered by looking at the manual. So what I now want to do is clean these rails up and lubricate them with some silicone. To be careful not to get the IPA on too many other bits, because I don't know how it would react to, for example, the plastic bits like the belt and the cogs. So I've avoided getting IPA on those, and also the platen. And this, I think, is actually going a bit rusty, so it may not be too long for this world. It's a little bit juddery, so I don't know if that's going to cause a problem. Now, I did wipe down the ribbon, but this looks like it's well dried out. It's been used an awful lot. You can see the marks from the pins, and it feels very, very dry. So I think that ribbon needs to be thrown away. Right, shall we put it back? I've cleaned up the inside of this case just really by IPA and a cleaning rag. It's not 100% perfect, but it's a lot better than it was without taking everything out and giving it a really good wash. So having a look at the circuit board, I don't know what this is. It's an Epson chip, obviously. It's copyright 1982. It appears to have an 8304 date code on it, but that's 8303, so it looks like this machine came from the spring of 1983. Okay, let's see if we can fit this back in. And the machine screws go into the machine screw holes. That's a plastic hole, that's a plastic hole. So usual technique for screwing into plastic, because we don't want to cut another thread, turn it back until you hear it click. There we go. I'm not going to screw this on, but I'm going to plug it in so that we can see whether the front panel works. This is keyed, so there is in fact only one way around to put it. So shall we see if it works? In the old days, printers always used to sit on a stand with the paper underneath them, and that's what I've done here. So we want to put in a brand new ribbon. It's sealed in plastic. Basically it slots down there, that goes through there like that. Okay, so that's the ribbon. The paper, comes through, it feeds through. Let's look to line these up with the sprocket holes. And then this was always a little bit of an art getting it to feed through. There we go. So there's paper in there, because you shouldn't really operate it without paper in there, and you shouldn't really operate it without a ribbon in there. So there's paper in there and there's a ribbon. Turn the mains on. Let's see what happens. Ooh, that's a good sign. Power ready online. Now, if I remember rightly, if you hold the line feed down while you turn it on, it will do a self-test and a print. So let's try that. Now we can adjust this, I think, to so offline, from feed, line feed. And you literally do a line feed, then adjust the top of the paper so that the tear off is at the right place, and Bob's your uncle. And one of the things that we can do is we can change one of these dip switches to make zeros have a slash through them. Let me just check which one that is. Okay, it's 1/2. There we go. So now if we print it again, this zero should have a slash through. Now the other dip switches in there are for things like ASCII character sets and language variations, and also whether you have carriage return or carriage return line feed. So you set that up on the printer here, and then whatever you send hopefully is the right thing. Or generally what happens is, if what the printer does is the wrong thing, you change that switch. So now the logical thing to do is to hook it up to something, and then we're going to retrobright this case. I've set the printer up with some paper and put the lids back on, just for the sake of having the lids on. I've set up my Amiga 600, and that has got some software installed on it, which we'll come on to. So, let's power the printer on. Okay, this is the same Amiga 600 that we looked at last week. So, to recap, it has 2 megabytes of chip RAM and no fast RAM. So, I've installed on it Protext, which is a word processor that I used during the day. And just so that you can see, comes a stack of floppies. Quite a big manual, quite a big chunky manual. That's the version 5 manual. This is version 5.5, and it comes with an addendum for that. So, nicely produced package from back in the day. So on here, Protext. The icons are a bit messy, but we won't worry about too much about that. Actually, before I look at that, what we just want to do is go into Preferences and check the printer. And I have already set this up, so it should be okay. It's looking at the Epson X, which I believe is the correct driver for the FX80. I'm not sure what the difference is between Epson X and Epson X Old, but that is the one that we've got, and it is on the parallel port. Okay, so Protext. Now I have loaded onto this a file. Okay, and this is a novella that I wrote some years ago, and I've just brought it into Protext. I've converted it from Microsoft Word on the Mac, just exported it as plain text, and so it's 24,500 words. Here we go, let's do a word count on it. Bear in mind that this is an unaccelerated Amiga 600, so it is running at the stockest of stock speeds. This is still just resting on here. I haven't screwed it down or anything, because we are going to Retrobright this once we have done with some printing. Compared to something modern like Microsoft Word, this is a very primitive word processor. But it's what I use during the day. And I used to edit magazines on this, I used to write articles on it, all sorts. Of course, in those days I was using something like an Amiga 3000, not an Amiga 600. But we have what we have. I could have done this on the 1200, but space. Okay, so here we are. Word count 24,518. Summary, number of characters 136,975, which kind of correlates with 134K for the document size. 3,290 different words, 2,377 lines, 2,235 sentences, 833 paragraphs, 42 pages, average word length 4.28 letters, average sentence length 10.97 words, average page length 583 words. And part of the reason, normally you would associate 600 words per page as being an average, but I've got footers defined on this, purely because I was playing around with the file and I thought, well, let's try and at least do something with it rather than just dump a load of text. So what you want to see is, does it print? I'm not going to print all 42 pages. 42 pages. So I'll just do the first couple. No, let's do the first 3. That's interesting. It did not like it. Huh. Ah. Is that the problem? There we go. So that was a paper jam, basically. But that has missed out the top of the document, unfortunately. So let's start it again. One thing it seems to do is it throws up this error warning. It seems to be printing fine, but it throws up that. I'm just going to OK it. Now you'll see we've got a footer on this page. This book is available on Amazon should you desire to read it. I'll put a link in the description. And of course this is printed in text mode. Let's just turn this off. There we go. And of course this listing paper, which is really only just lightweight 860 GSM, I think. The perforations tear off as well. This comes in big boxes of like 2,000 sheets. And then you've got a nice sheet of it's US letter size. This is always US letter size. You don't really get an option for A4. At least you did get an option for A4, but these printers were not really set up to handle it. The drivers were not really set up to handle it. But as well as text mode, it can do graphics mode. And we can do a graphic dump, which will give us a screenshot effectively and print it out. Now the big difference you'll see with this is that it is only printing it in one direction. So there we are, that is a screen dump in graphics mode. And the resolution is fairly low because of course this is a 9-pin. This is a 9-pin printer, so it is what it is. But this is what we had during the day, back in the day, and I'm really pleased to have this again, actually, to be honest, once it's cleaned up, and we'll do that next. I think this is going to be a very nice little printer. It was a real workhorse back during the day, and I think it's going to be a real workhorse again now. It's Monday morning, they've been under the UV all weekend, so let's have a look and see what they're like. They look like they've had an improvement. Let's clean them off and take a look. So the pieces are back from the Retrobrighting. I think they're a lot improved. They're very slightly mottled, but on the whole, that's the little thing. And these are the 3 switches. You can see they still are a little bit yellowed, but this hasn't done quite as well because quite frankly, it's not too bad on there. I mean, it's only had a couple of days, and it's been cream, which cream never seems to work as well. But I've got some ideas. Unfortunately, this is too big to go in a pot with some liquid. Partly because I haven't got a bin that's big enough, and partly because the amount of liquid that it would take to cover this, even if you fill sort of pots of something in between, the amount of liquid that you would need would actually cost more than the price I paid for the printer. So I'm not sure whether it's worth doing that, but I think I'm going to have another go with the cream. I've got some ideas how to do that a bit better, but not for this video. That will be for another time. So let's reassemble. And this only had like a couple of hours because I forgot to put this in originally. So let's put the switches back in. Okay, I've lifted this board out. There you are. You can see. There you are. You can see the switch contacts. Now that, okay, so that clips over there like that, and it screws down. These screws were originally Loctited, so it's clear that they don't want you taking the panel apart. But there we go, and because this is... I have committed the cardinal crime. I have screwed the long screw into the short hole, because you can see it's bubbled up. So what I'm going to have to do is take these out, find the short screw, just slice that off. There we go, because we have to make that lie flat. There we go, right size screws this time. There we go, perfect. So this clips into here. There we go. This cover plate goes into the back. You can actually see how clean that this can come. So we need to get the rest of this to this colour, or this colour, and I think with some effort we will be able to do it. So there it is, the Epson FX80. It's not going to do very much because there's no paper in it. Let's put some paper in. There we go, Epson FX80 is not coming on. What have I done wrong? What have I not connected? An important discovery. If your printer is plugged into your Amiga and you switch it on, make sure the Amiga is switched on, otherwise the ready light does not come on. So this is the Epson FX80, and one thing I would like to do with it at some point is to find an interface card for either an IEEE 488 to use with a PET, or for an IEC to use with a C64, and plug that in and try it out and see if we can get it to work as a Commodore printer. That would be a very interesting, I think, experiment. This white panel now looks out of place. I remember the Aliens film when Ripley wipes Newt's face and says, "Oh look, there's a clean spot." Well, there's a clean spot. We're going to have to clean the rest of it. So, plug it in. Yay! Come back and see us next time. As usual, subscribe and hit the like button. We're very, very close. As I record this, we're very, very close to 1,000 subscribers. So please, I think we need about 50. So please come back and see us next time. Thank you for watching. See ya.